Welcome to the J.Geiger Studios podcast, where we help you achieve your ideal outcome. We're here to provide value to you and your organization every step of the way. I'm your host and guide on this journey, Jeff Geiger, and I am happy that you're here with us today. Today in the studios, we have Nate Hepner. He is the lead of the Managed Solutions practice here at J.Geiger Consulting, and I can't wait to tell you a little bit more about that. It's come to fruition. It's actually maybe shortly and soon going to undergo a bit of a rename, but we'll tell you a little bit more about that practice coming up here in a little bit. Welcome, Nate.
Appreciate it, Jeff. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Thanks for taking an hour out of your day to sit down and have a conversation.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. How long have you been here now?
So I'm going on a little bit over 2 years now,
Wow.
which...
that time's flown by.
Yeah, it has moved very quickly. And I think it's
a little bit of stuff in that journey.
Yeah, just a few. I think like 27 clients I've worked with or something like that. You know,
that's not the norm for J.Geiger.
No, definitely not from what I've heard.
We'll get into that in a little bit, because the managed solutions stuff that you've really been taking a lead on is a lot different model than what we're used to.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to see what it does in the future for the company. I think across the board, really bringing that portfolio of type of business in can really just flare up every other practice.
I think it's it's dealing with small to mid-sized companies, and I think they're underserved, frankly.
Oh, massively. Yeah, the amount of information that's missing for small to medium-sized companies, especially in the security space, where the managed solutions or managed services, most people know it in the space, it's so lacking that you'll have companies that they specialize and they are fantastic in what they do, but they won't either think to look at bringing in an IT person or an IT company to help them assist. And you can really be put in situations where
they wait till a problem happens.
Yeah, and sometimes when a problem happens, it's already too late for you.
Yep.
Especially if something like ransomware gets on one of your devices, which is so simple. And some of the ways that we can talk about later on how those types of things can happen. Unless you're trained to look for that specific thing, you're not going to notice it until it's too late. And then from there, there's really nothing we can do for you.
Wow. Yeah. Huh. And now you didn't start there. When you came on board with J.Geiger, you started out as a Scrum Master. How did you get introduced to us? How did you find out about us?
So I was working for a company in De Pere, Wisconsin, and I was really enjoying what I was doing there. And I had a mentor that was actually there with me, and he kept on really preaching that he knew what the best career path was for me, just based off my various experiences and quite a few jobs I had before that. He really thought that I'd just be a fantastic Scrum Master. He's like, just your knowledge base, everything you bring to the table, the way you communicate with people and really, just resolve issues and find ways to get across roadblocks. That's where you want to focus your career length.
But you already had experience in that before, right?
Yeah, correct. So when I was at Rockwell Automation in their advanced industrial lab in Mequon, Wisconsin, building variable frequency drives, specifically their Power Performance 755 series, it was one of those things where every single time we met, we did something called a 10-day proper, which is kind of outside the line of a normal Scrum team where you'd meet on a daily basis. Instead, what you did is do a Tuesday and a Thursday meeting. For people that are Scrum Masters or ever been on a Scrum team, that might sound like heresy, but it is very efficient because it gives you a 2-day gap range, and that gives you the capability to really knock out a lot of work before you come back for that 15-minute meeting.
Come back together
and talk about your roadblocks and your issues or anything that you can't get past. And it just really gives you a lot of time to focus. So we were running one of those, and it was a fantastic environment. And I got to learn a lot about the Scrum process as well as how to do large PI planning phases. And at Rockwell Automation, we had these 16-week periods where we would every 16 weeks come together as an entire company, and we would actually take up the entire gymnasium at the Rockwell headquarters in Milwaukee. And we'd all sit there with multiple different departments, multiple different teams, multiple different locations. And as everybody's sitting around tables, we'd come up with what our next objectives were for the next 16 weeks.
Yeah.
And then we'd plan those out accordingly. We'd have the stakeholders in, they'd kind of walk around each of the tables and check out, what was the plan? What were we doing? They'd sign off on it, check all their books and everything else that they needed to make sure that we were in line with their goals. And then from there, that next 16 weeks was us achieving it as a team by ourselves. And it was fantastic.
Interesting thing about that is how in the world a company could get from traditional business operations into something like that. So I have a quick question about your mentor. Was he trying to convince or suggesting that you should go into that from a specializing area and in consulting, or was it like how did it come about that you got introduced to us?
So how it came about is when he, kind of worked with me for quite some time and actually was in the process of poaching me from the research and development team that I was on, so that I could come and do Scrum Master work for him in his manufacturing part of the facility. He kept on asking me about it. And it came a point where I was like, fine, let's do it. Let's knock it out. So I went and did the 3-day course with Scrum Alliance. It was a fantastic course. I really enjoyed that. And then from there, I came back and I started using those skills. And I was actually able to design and build a process that was used in 3 countries.
Was this at his company?
At that company, yeah.
Okay.
So I was at Durr Megtech in De Pere, Wisconsin.
Okay. Durr is bigger though, right?
Correct. Yeah. So Durr is a multi-billion-dollar corporation out of Germany.
One segment of
and this is so the Megtech portion is a company that specializes in lithium-ion technology for printing battery filaments, pretty much. And it was a really specialized industry, something that I was absolutely fascinated in, being somebody who worked at Tesla as well, and worked in their research and development department on the Model 3 and the Semi, and some of the other vehicles in there as well. But it's just one of those things where just the environment and really just kind of bringing it up, makes me really happy. So I wanted to learn as much as I could about that R&D phase. But with the amount of work that company had, and also at the time being around the big COVID issue that all of us were having with the workforce, a lot of work was being pushed into manufacturing, and that's where I found a lot of work and was able to help out teams. So in time, it became to where I was doing more work in manufacturing than I was doing in R&D.
I see.
And they said, let's make the transition. Let's move him over from there. And with my manager at the time actually being in Germany, working on a big battery installation of these massive lithium-ion producing machines over there and fine-tuning them. It was one of those scenarios where it was like all leadership is gone, and it was just kind of assigned to manufacturing. And I was able to do some really incredible things over there. And that really just led me to the point where I started kind of looking at like long-term plans of where I wanted to go with this. And I kind of realized that it wasn't just into the manufacturing space. I didn't want to just kind of become stagnant in what I was doing. So I put up my resume, and Nick D'Amelico reached out.
Okay. All right.
So you guys brought me in originally for a project management position, which I believe was for...
It was for Go Guide.
No.
So
the project management was for, I think it was Scott Forge. It was their project management position.
Not coming through.
That didn't come through.
Yep.
So I got a call from Nick, and he said, hey, it's not going to work out. And, at that time, I think I've probably had about 1,000 conversations with the recruiters and just various companies.
Just one more.
And I was just like, it's just another one where it's like, oh, we'll give you a call back as soon as we find something.
Yeah.
Never get called back, right? And then a few months later, I got called back, and they're like, do you want to come to the plate? And I said, heck yeah, I'd love to.
Yep. And then that's when he introduced you, and you came in for interviews and stuff, and we're like, yeah, let's do this. Yeah, that seems like, in some respects, seems like a long time ago, but also seems like it was just yesterday with all the stuff that's happened.
Yeah, we've really put a lot on the agenda.
That seems to be like your life is kind of like that. You put a lot on your plate.
Yeah, I like to have constant difficulty in my life. That way I can just learn and evolve from it. Yeah. And it's usually all stuff that I, put together myself or put on my plate. So it's easy to take it off. But
I'm pretty sure people who do that, they do that to themselves. I can completely understand. Like one of my problems is I say yes way too much. So
yeah, I picked up on that one.
Yeah.
But
had to
then
say
again,
no
it's
on occasion
done very
too.
good for you in my case.
Yep. Well, so going way back. So you grew up in Lake Tahoe, right? Like that's what everybody knows. Is that actually where you grew up in Lake Tahoe?
So I grew up in a place called Reno, Nevada. Specifically, the suburb was called Stead.
Okay.
And it's this kind of offshoot that like nobody knows about, and that's why I just say Lake Tahoe, Nevada, because like everybody just they're pinged to that immediately.
Is Lake Tahoe and Reno
they're
close
right
to
next to each other.
Okay, and Reno is like in northern Nevada?
Correct. Yeah. So most people, when they look at the Reno, Nevada area, or just Nevada in general, there's only 2 states that really stick out to them, and none of them is the capital. So the Carson City, Nevada is the actual capital, and it's like this old Western town type feel. But Reno, Nevada is mainly known for, or Reno Tahoe International Airport it's known for. And that's an international airport, and they do mainly like family resorts. That's like what they're known for. And then there's Las Vegas, right? So it's like family resorts or partying. Those are kind of your 2 points. So I grew up in the family resorts area.
There's still the whole gambling stuff there,
there
but
is
it's
still
not as
gambling,
prevalent
but not as prevalent. Yeah. There's every single hotel will have a large gambling floor, but
that's not the focus.
Yeah, that's not the focus. You're seeing, massive resorts, huge pool constructs, a lot of them will have like arcades and giant amusement parks around them. They just really try and focus on the
economy
family
around that area. Is it largely like catering to travelers and stuff and kind of that kind of thing and vacationing, or are there other industries around there too?
So for pretty much the entire time I was growing up, it was mainly about the tourism industry. That was really where all the focus was at. A lot of things started to change when I was actually in the military. The great thing about Nevada is that there's so much land that is underutilized because it's just flat desert, right? But if you're a, big corporation, like what are you really looking for? You're looking for flat space that you can put up as many manufacturing buildings and, facility complexes for storage and shipping and receiving. You need open space to do that.
Yeah, so it's open,
it's cheap,
it's dry
space, which is just perfect for any shipping and the receiving industry. Reno, Nevada, I think for a long time it was really just not focused on, which I always thought was crazy because the best thing about Reno, Nevada, in my opinion, is that I-80 and 395 both intersect right in the middle of the town. So you run into this scenario where you have transportation from all directions coming into one focal point. Right. And then at the same time, you also have a lot of railroad tracks that all emerge into the same point.
But it sounds like, from what you're saying, they're starting to, over the last 20 years, maybe, they've started to really do that.
When my family first moved into our house, I remember that there was like nothing really around us. It was a pretty small community. And then over time, just the amount of houses that got built in that area, early 2006 range, was just an insane amount. Builders could not build them fast enough to keep people coming in. And then we had that crash in the early 2000s and people just stopped building. And I remember lots of conversations where people were like, yeah, I bought my house for $300,000. And then, a month later I saw the same house, cookie cutter house down the street sell for like 165. And it like blew their mind. Right. So it was one of those things where the industry started to grow, and then we had that setback. It was right around the same time I was graduating high school, which was in 2010, and getting ready to join the military. When I was in the military, and we can talk more on that, but when I was in the military, that's when Tesla really started pushing for moving out of the Fremont area and moving into a different area. So they started doing bids all over the place. And one of those bids was actually in the Reno, Nevada area, specifically in, I believe it's Fallon, right outside Fallon. And they found a very small town, and they signed this ridiculous like 50-year no tax deal. And there's like one road off the freeway going into this town, and they built, I think it's the biggest by square footage building on the entire planet. It's just massive. Now it's just industry nonstop. So the transition was just hotels and stuff. Right. Now it's right when Tesla came in, it became, I think it was like,
on the map,
it was like 30,000 jobs it created just by building the place. Then the infrastructure and then there was Amazon got built. They built a giant Amazon plant, another shipping and receiving plant. And then it became this thing where you couldn't find houses. So the housing shortage although there was way too many in 2009, by 2016, there was not enough.
So if people held on to their $170,000 or $160,000,
they're worth like close to $600,000 or $700,000.
Yeah. So it cratered, and then it came way, way back, and then some.
Yeah. My parents, they bought a foreclosed home after all the kids left, and my dad fixed it up and got it all back together because the other house that we had was just far too large. You don't have 6 kids. You don't need that big of a house. So he fixed it up and got it back, but I think he spent like $40,000 on the house, and I think he told me it was close to around like $350 now. Wow. So, and the house it's like, it looks like a trailer park. You're like, it's a nice community, but at the same time, I'm like,
$350,000.
Oh my gosh!
It's all relative, though.
It is. It's a shortage. Because the big manufacturing companies came in and they bought up all the land because they knew that there was going to be a massive industrial shift when Tesla signed those contracts. Then they started selling that land, but then they just buy more land. So the amount of space that now you can build houses is so minimal that you're really stuck in a position where either you build houses so far out of town that nobody wants them, or you bulldoze a house and build on top of it.
Right.
And that's exactly what's happening.
Huh. So, is there military stuff going on in Nevada too?
So Nevada does have quite a few Air Force bases, being so close to really a lot of missile testing sites that we have and stuff like that. There's just a lot of open space that you can destroy stuff.
It's the same kind of thing. Yeah. We were saying before,
drop
a lot of
bomb
flat
there,
stuff.
nobody cares, that kind of thing.
Sand.
So there's a lot of testing
that's
areas.
The perspective of it. So you mentioned before you went to high school, and then coming out of high school, you went into the military.
Correct.
Now, your family has a history of being in the military as well, right? Your dad was in the service as well?
Yeah. So my whole family, as far back as we can track, every single male has served in the United States military to an extent. So my family originally came from Germany as far back as I can do on Ancestry. It's sometime around the early 1700s. Is when they actually moved over. Most of them are situated in the high north region of Wisconsin, specifically around like Ashland, Bayfield, Apostle Islands area. That's where we're mainly focused. And then over time, obviously, kind of people shifted and spread out a little bit more. So originally it's...
So they would have immigrated here sometime in the 1800s. They started out east in the 1700s somewhere?
It's kind of an interesting story. So my father has a brother as well. And then his mom and dad, they were store owners in Bayfield, Wisconsin. So he grew up in a town of 300 people. Some of the stories he tells me are some of the most hilarious stories that I could give a couple. Just some fantastic small town life stories, and people playing pranks on each other and kids.
What are you going to do when there's only 300 people around? You got to keep yourself busy.
Yeah, I think he got shot with like rock salt once, like stealing apples from a neighbor or something, and. One year they were like pushing over like porta potties, and the guy that they did it to every year, he moved the porta potty like 6 feet forward. So when they like approached it from the woods, they just fell right into the hole where all the poop was at. So there's just some crazy stuff like that. But he grew up in a small town, and when he joined the military when he was 18, along with his brother went into the Navy for becoming an engineer. So he worked on warships down in the boiler room area.
Okay.
And then my father joined the Navy. And in his test, he was thinking about doing, I believe it was, he wanted to go like Navy SEALs was kind of the route that he wanted to go. But something happened in the process, and he somehow got stuck doing like clerical duty. He had his mother was a school teacher, and she was fantastic with the English language and grammar.
So he had a knack for that. So he ended up getting pushed that direction.
Yeah. So ended up pushing that direction. So he did a lot of clerical work, typing, that kind of thing. Did he not
like that?
I'm not too sure.
He never really
talked about it too much, but from my understanding, he didn't like it that much.
So then you and your brother both went into the military.
Correct. So my brother,
did he live vicariously through you guys, since you guys weren't doing clerical work?
No, he never did that. My parents were very low pressure the entire time growing up. So I come from a family of 6 kids. So I'm the youngest out of everyone. And there's a 4-year gap between myself and then my brother. Okay. Which puts us in a scenario where to really like communicate and grow. Growing up, I had to be older. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it was always a shift. As much as my older brother liked to say I did not mature as fast as him, there was definitely things I had to learn a lot faster. It's all a matter of perspective,
because I bet you did. You probably had to mature faster than him because you wanted to be accepted by him and probably his friends.
Exactly. So growing up was great, but joining the military is one of those things that in the back of our head, we always knew that was what was coming. So when my brother joined the United States Navy, he went in as I believe he was going for MP. And then there was something that happened, and some positions got moved around or something, and he ended up as a bosun mate, which is like pretty much used to like clean the side of the ship. Okay. So it's he kind of got an unfair shake, in my opinion, from some of the details that, just aren't mine to share. But at the same time, when I was looking at going in, my mom was like, yeah, you can join the Navy and I'll, be fine with you like getting signed up and everything else. And I remember I went through MEPS and I did the whole process for the ASVAB, and I was kind of sitting there and I was thinking like, what do I really want to do? And I was like, God, I really don't want to be stuck on a ship. Like, I'd love to see a combat zone. Like, I feel like that'd be fun, young, stupid kid that doesn't understand how the world works. And
you saw the unfair shake your brother got by then, right?
There's a lot of red flags with the Navy, because it was, I think that at that time, and maybe they've changed their policy, but I believe that you could pick like one of 3 jobs. And then when you got through basic training, if they were available, you got which one. And I was like, that doesn't sound fair. Like, I'm going to sign up for this for 4 years. I don't even get to pick the job. But they were giving out huge bonuses, though. So I think that's why a lot of people were interested in it. But for me, it was like the Army was like, I'll tell you exactly what you're going to get right when you get here. So I picked 11. I picked 11 series. They don't tell you exactly what you're going to be until you get to basic training. But
what is 11 series?
So 11 series is infantry.
Okay.
So either you're going to be a mortar guy, which is 11 Charlie, or you're going to be, the ones that actually matter, which is 11 Bravo.
Don't they all matter? Come on.
Not really.
Okay. That's not for me to decide.
A lot of people mad just now. But it's all right.
The 11 Bs against 11 Cs.
Oh yeah. And it's sadly, it's a designation that like, it's really just like where you were standing. Cause when you're in basic training, they kind of line everybody up and they're like, A, C, A, C, A, C, like all the way down the line. Yep. And you're like, what does that mean? And then you're like, oh, this is my whole future for the next 4 years. And the problem is that the 11 Bravos, they get a gun, right? It's like you have, your M4, or you have your 240, your submachine gun. Or else you're in one of these situations where you become a Charlie and you have a gun, but they also give you a mortar. But then not just a mortar, one of the C's is going to also have the rounds for the mortar. So it's like you could like get the worst, like it's the same one, but you could get the worst job, which is you don't even get to shoot the mortar. You just got to carry all the stuff for the mortar, which is like the worst job you can possibly have, because it's super heavy, overwhelming. You got to, keep account for it, blow out your eardrums super early in your career. It's a hell of a life.
Huh. All just because of where you were standing.
All because of where you were standing.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Huh. I never really knew that. And so did you do 4 years, like a total of 4 years in there?
So I actually did longer than that. So when I was in the U.S. Army, I came up on my 3-year and 16-week time frame that I signed for. And then after that, I would do an additional term in the National Guard.
Yep.
Instead of that, when I came up to my actual time frame in December of 2015, I actually was in a position as a supply sergeant for the U.S. Army. And they said, we don't have our last person that is supposed to replace you. So what we'd like to do is we'd like to sign a deck statement with you. Pretty much what it was is if I continued out my term past that point, they would waive my need to go into the reserves afterwards.
Okay.
But there was no
so there's like
set
added
point.
Benefit thing.
Yeah. So there was no set point though. It was pretty much if I, it could be 6 months or it could be the entire length of my term.
Sure.
Luckily, I had a really good relationship with my first sergeant at the time, so he was very cool about it. And it took, so that was in, I think they told me around like September, and then I actually got out in May of 2016.
Okay.
So I didn't have to wait that long, but the amount of time that I got saved from having to do like National Guard.
Sticking around.
Yeah. Being a ditch digger or something in the National Guard. It was one of those things where I was just like, that was a win. It was a godsend in my opinion, which opened up a lot of doors.
What'd you end up doing after 2016?
While I was in the military as presidential escort, so I was mainly stationed on Fort Myron, Washington, D.C.
Okay. When were you a supply sergeant versus the presidential detail?
So presidential detail would have ended, let's see. So it usually ends around like 3 months before you get out of the military.
Okay.
The reason why it changes is because when you're getting out of the military, they send you through something called ACAP, which is like your training for how to be a veteran outside the military, right?
Sure.
So you have to go through all these schools for like benefits, understanding like how your benefits work, how they interact, what things you have available to you, how to do a resume, how to communicate with employers, not how to talk about like, the greatest experience I have in my career is shooting a Barrington 50 cal. Like that's not experience, like what things are appropriate,
People
what are not.
Outside the military can't, because you used a lot of acronyms and stuff like that earlier. I'm assuming that they talk about that kind of stuff.
They do. Yeah. You have to really, you have to explain things out a lot more.
Sure.
In the military, like there's a website you can go to where it explains like just look up acronyms in the military.
Right.
And there's like over 150,000 acronyms. And the problem is that most of them are like
150.
Oh God. No, there's thousands upon thousands of them.
I know
and they're
better
usually
than
based
that.
off of like the units themselves too. So it's like one thing can mean one and it could be completely different in the next case. Sure. So going into a conversation at, like say an electrical company or something applying for a position, you have to understand the argot of the military communication point.
Yeah. Jordan's pulling it up right here. Is that what you're talking about? Military One Source?
Yeah. So you could probably go there.
AIT. Yeah. ASVAB.
So ASVAB is your Armed Service Vocational Aptitude Battery Test. That's what you take before you get into the military.
Yep, I remember you said that.
There's a lot of scores you can get
MEPS,
up to.
You said MEPS before too, didn't you?
MEPS. Yeah. That is a Military Interest Processing Station. So that would be your area. MOS. So that's 11 Bravo is your MOS. OPSEC is just security, how you do things. PT's physical training. Like there's quite a few different.
There's 150,000 of those.
Yeah. And, you can kind of scroll through all day, but it really just comes down to there's your basic ones that everybody are going to hear and everybody's going to know from just literally going to basic training.
Right.
You'll get that. Even
and
if
then you get into your specialty, then
that's when it starts changing and just going crazy.
It could be different from place to place even. Wow.
Exactly. So when I was getting out of presidential escort, they said, you can't be in the front of the line anymore. If every single day at like 1 p.m., you got to be going to, the ACAP people and having them teach you about different things about your resume. So they actually remove you from that position and then they find somewhere else for you to do your job on the installation. So
while you're finishing up your time before you get released.
Exactly. So, because you're going to have a bunch of appointments that'll take you away from duty.
So you mentioned presidential detail and we didn't kind of come about how you ended up in presidential detail, but some of the things I've noticed about you is that you're very precise, you're very articulate, you're like the way that you carry yourself is very, a lot of that has to have come from that too. And it's you and how you were anyway, but then it is accentuated by the fact of you having to be so precise when you're in training and whatnot. Like you lived that life, right?
Yeah. It massively came from the way that I was trained in the military. Growing up, my dad was always a very analytical person. Every conversation he ever had with me, being a chief engineer at Harris Laundry in Reno, Nevada area, which if anybody's from that area, they know exactly what I'm talking about. It's one of the largest hotels out there. They have another one called Harvey's Lake Tahoe, which is up in Lake Tahoe. And my dad was in their laundry facility, every morning from 4 a.m. until usually around like 8 p.m. at night, working crazy shifts and working super hard. But every conversation he had with me, he'd kind of like get to a point where he'd explain it and he could realize I wasn't quite there because he's much more intelligent than me. And he'd take out a napkin and start, scribbling on it, just writing out the details and the points on how everything's structured so that I could understand a visual concept of what his brain was telling him. Getting into the military, I came into it with that mindset that I'd have to figure out a lot of stuff. Being infantry, I didn't think there'd really be that much other than, pointing and shooting a gun or learning how to call something over a radio or, how to put a tourniquet on. But when I got to presidential escort, which is something you have to be recruited for based off of your size and different characteristics about yourself, like military, your background, criminal laws or anything that you've done wrong, your physical fitness score comes into account. So you have to be popping over a 300, which is what you max out on. And then your size, you have to be over 6'9". So me being, 6'6", and with me being 6'9", it was a shoe-in for me. So
yeah, you are taller than the average.
Yeah.
Which we do have a lot of, that's kind of weird. In our office, we have a lot of tall people, more than normal, I think. Because I'm slightly below average height. And we have a lot of people here that make up for that. I think we've got, 5-6 people that are over 6 feet or more.
Yeah, I'd say that's about right.
And some very over 6 feet, like you, Lincoln,
and
Adam.
the Patricks. Yep.
Yeah. It's fun. I think it's kind of cool. I'm glad we got taller ceilings now than what we had at the old place.
Yeah, this new facility is fantastic.
Yeah.
But being in the military and joining Presidential Escort, when I decided to sign up for that, it was one of those things where it was like a 20/20 hindsight. Like, how immature are you, and how much do you understand the real world? Because I remember that when I was talking to the person who was recruiting me and about 6 other guys at Fort Benning in Georgia, when we were sitting there on these bleachers, and he was like, yeah, so we're recruiting you for Presidential Escort because of like all these characteristics. We think you'd be a fantastic applicant for it. All you guys got to do is just let us know, and then we'll just, sign you away. Originally, the path was that I was going to go and try out for Ranger School and try and make it through that path. And there's no guarantee on that. It's just one of those things that if you can do it, fantastic. But that's what my contract was kind of pointing me towards. And then Ranger School would then allow you to kind of, if you got that, there's a lot of other things. But I wanted to go towards like Special Forces. That was kind of my trajectory line. But the Presidential Escort one, if you signed up, you said yes, they would literally just change your paperwork and switch you over, and then that's your new trajectory.
That's what it is. It's not a crapshoot once you get that into it.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was kind of just like a changeover, and I was like, all right, yeah, that sounds interesting. And the follow-up was, I thought this was weird because after they sold us, they told us it, and it wasn't like a pitch to sell us. But I remember the sergeant, and I think he was a master sergeant, he was standing there. He said, and I'm just letting you know that right after you finish your 3 years, because it's a fenced-in deployment, they call it, so you're not allowed to be deployed. You're stuck right there on the installation. They said, unless you transfer out to another position or something like that, you'll be there for 3 years. But the benefit of that is that after your 3 years, they'll send you to any school you want to go to. And in my mind, being a very naive person of the military, the first thing I thought was, I could just like go right into halo jumping for Special Forces. Like that was a straight shoot right there. And I remember that when I got to Washington, D.C., I was also very ununderstanding of where the capital of the country was, because when they said Washington, they didn't add DT to it. So I was like, I'm going to be right next to like Nevada, where I'm from, right? So then the flight from Atlanta to DC was like 2 hours. And I was like, wow, that was a fast plane. And then I'm like, this doesn't feel anything like the West Coast. So it took me a while to kind of realize what was going on, but
you were in Washington State. You were out in
Washington D.C.
Yeah.
So then when I finally got to my installation, I remember when I was checking in at the front desk, they're like, "Oh yeah, Presidential Escort. That's fantastic. Yeah, you're going to be starting your A school soon." And I was like, really excited for that. And then the guy just looked at me. He's like, "I just got to know, what did they tell you to get you to come here?" And I was like, well, what do you mean? They're like, there's like one thing. They always say like one thing that like gets you to come.
Well, I could go to anything I want after.
Exactly. Yeah, I was like, I could go to anything. And they're like, yeah, you're not going anywhere. After this, they're going to send you back to another duty station. And because you've been marching and doing state dinners and stuff, you know nothing about being an infantryman at that point. So they're going to put you they're going to de-rank you, put you right back to where you're at before. And I was like, oh my God. Like,
that's not what I thought.
Yeah. It was a hard lesson, but.
So what was can you think of one thing that was like the coolest presidential detail thing that you had to do? Because I have to imagine that there's quite a few soldiers that are in that, and that there's like the front line folks and, that are like the ones who are like the super best at it. Like, how far up that did you make it, and what kind of exposure did you end up having? Because there's probably cycling through people.
Yeah, so there's different positions. So on Fort Myer in Washington, D.C., there is I believe there's 5 companies themselves. So there's Echo Company, Delta, Bravo, Charlie.
And how many people in a company?
So I think it's 160 people in total. So it pretty much breaks
thousands of men.
Yeah, so it's thousands of men. And then we also share the installation with the Air Force as well as the Marines as well. So there's quite a few different details on there. But each company has their own specialty that they're in. So one company is specifically just caisson, which is like horse-drawn carriages, that kind of stuff.
Okay, for those types of events.
Yeah, for those types of events like funerals and different types of things. So when I went to A school, which is the training portion for that, which is very odd because the military kind of got rid of the A school structure for the infantry. I believe that's actually the only A school that still exists for the infantry. It's now called OSUT, which is one unit training. And OSUT is it used to be that you'd go through basic training for like 2 months. And then after that, you'd have like a month and a half at A school. But now that's just OSUT, which means you just stay with the people that, hate you the entire time and they just make your life hell. Your basic training drill instructors that just nonstop. You don't get a break the entire time.
But during that time, did you not get to kind of do some, like you get put out and you're like doing something within the presidential
Correct,
circle?
Yeah. So what happened was when I got to A school, then from there, they start training you on how to not really be an infantryman anymore, but how to be presidential escort infantryman. Right. So every single time I say that, people are like, oh, president, you must have worked with a president.
Right.
That's not us. That's mainly Marines that do that type of thing. What we do is we pretty much do all of your burial duties, your parades, state dinners, White House events, anything that they need. People for it to be like a show horse. Right. That's your main point.
Why do you think that's an important part of what we do? Like,
it's drastically important for what we do. And the reason why is because it's something that most people don't really think about. So one of the first events that I did was at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. It was really just standing there for a delegation party from another country to come in and lay a wreath at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, which is kind of a traditional thing that you have to do if you're coming to the country for the first time. And it shows respect to the people that were lost or not found. And it's one of those things where everyone has to do it. And I was standing there, I was front row being the tallest, and I'm standing at attention. I have my rifle, and there's all the other branches of the military there. There's the tomb guards there. And there's this delegation party, they pull up in a limousine and then they, walk up to the front. And I kind of was standing there and I was like, and they put the wreath down and they walk back, and then everybody, all the military soldiers, we all turn and walk and march out. And I remember I was talking to my sergeant later that day and I was like, so like everything has a purpose. So like, what was the purpose of that? And he's like, well, you got to take into account that how they got here, right? And you have to take into account the speed limit. So you have this delegation party, and it's an intimidation thing. So the delegation party comes in the United States. The first time that they see actual soldiers for the military is, other than like CNN and stuff, they see these, over 6'6", big buff, perfectly dressed in uniform soldiers standing like every 3 feet away from each other, all the way down the procession line from the front gates to the tomb. And then they have to walk past all of the branches of the military, and every single one of them are giants. It's intimidating, and especially how perfectly dressed we are and everything else that we really focus on. And when people say like, I'm perfectly dressed, you are not perfectly dressed. Unless you were trained by the infantry and presidential escort, we were trained to a standard to where we had micrometers in our pockets, which have a tick, which is about the size of a millimeter. And we were actually measuring each other's clothing for being a tick off in everything. So we get to a point where, getting back to your conversation about kind of doing things in process, that's what it was from.
And that gave you a totally different eye.
Correct. Yeah. So early in my career in the presidential escort, I was like, this really isn't that important. Then when I started realizing all of the different ceremonies that we do and the importance of what it represents to the people as well as other countries and national affairs that we are in, it really started making me become really OCD when other people would mess up and really wouldn't be on the same page. And it came to the point to where me and a couple of the other people that were in my rank, we could literally be watching people come towards us and see like visually things off if they were off a tick, or if something was skewed, or if there was a problem, and immediately just jump on them for it, because it was one of those things where you can't have that type of
especially when you're at that level and when you're basically representing the entirety of all branches of the military at that point. It's like that's interesting. Like, it's not just about being a show horse, what you said before. It's about that representation across the globe of the greatness that you can achieve.
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah. So, so that was fantastic. When I was getting out of the military, though, I had a really awesome visit while I was as a supply sergeant. They had somebody from Sierra Nevada Corporation actually come in and check our simple key loaders, which is an SKL. It's like a military smartphone. It allows you to pretty much call in medical aid, or put down GPS locations for something, or call in airstrikes. It's just pretty much a brick is what it is, with a screen and some buttons. But they have to be checked every 5 years. So it was hand receipt time. We were checking all of our equipment. This pretty much field service rep came in, and I spent about a week with him, and I had a really good conversation. And he found out that I was going to be getting out of the military soon. He's like, you picked up understanding how to work with these pretty quickly. He's like, back in actually Sierra Nevada, where I'm from, in Sparks, Nevada, which is like shares a pretty much 395. The opposite side of it is Sparks, Nevada. It's like a split city section. He said that, if I was getting out, I should reach out to him about a job. So when I was getting out of the military, that's exactly what I did. I had a secret security clearance at the time because I was presidential escort, and that kind of gives you a little bit more of a favorability when it comes to being an applicant. It's less about them being worried about training you in the job and more about their government contract that they have says they have to have a certain number of people that have a security clearance, and me having a secret one
really helped.
That was the value.
Yeah.
So although I was, pretty much a grunt, I didn't have much understanding of technology or anything else. They brought me in and started training me just to have access to the security clearance.
He recognized your aptitude. Maybe that did get the door open partially, but your ability to pick up technology has really helped you out there. That and like your crazy drive. So fast forward a number of years, you went through the various companies you worked at. You mentioned Tesla and all that, but you eventually ended up on our shores here. And, we tried a couple different things and whatnot. We even had you at a client for a while, but you approached me earlier this year and you said, I really want to do this. And you laid it out, the managed solutions that we're doing, because we're kind of doing this for larger companies.
Correct. Yeah. So we started with McKinley Paper in the beginning. They came in for a client, and it was more of a support contract where I would be managing the tickets that were coming through, and then also the very skilled people that we had working with them. And that contract's still going. It's just been fantastic experience point. But I saw this kind of need, and I thought, this is 2000. I think it was like 23, early 23 that this kicked off, and I thought, wow, this is, I think, something that we're missing here. I think that, the amount of skill and the amount of just knowledge base we have in-house and years of dedicated experience to this industry, it'd be fantastic if people could kind of pick and pull what they need instead of coming in and saying, we need a 40-hour contract and all of these other things and long conversations and getting all these sign-offs on approval. How fantastic would it be if somebody could just sign a nice, simple, easy contract and then have just $1 per hour exchange with an individual for whatever they need done?
Yeah, and I have to be honest, I had this vision of decades ago of having that type of offering because up until this point, we were basically signing people for either all or some fraction of their time for some length of time at some rate, which to small and mid-sized companies, that gets to be a pretty big dollar amount. Now, if they're backfilling for someone they'd have to pay anyway, that offsets a big chunk of it. And then when they're done, they can just let us go, rather than having to deal with employment issues and stuff. But that's the type of contracts we were used to. Then we had an opportunity a while back to kind of do that fractional model to help out a customer of ours that had a piece of software that they owned. We brought their employees in-house, and then we booked them to the companies that they were supporting. And the people would log tickets and stuff like that. And it seemed to work, but that was only in that realm. And then we applied that same thing to McKinley, but still we're talking about $500 million to multiple $billion companies. We're not talking about small to mid-sized companies.
Correct.
And I started catching wind around me of small companies that were struggling with the same types of things we struggled with before you got involved with it, where we're provisioning our own devices, we're managing our own licenses, we're managing our own security, and we're kind of like, the old story of the cobbler's shoes where the, cobbler's kids are walking around with holes in their shoes, but he's fixing everybody else's shoes. That's kind of what we were doing until you came along. And so we took that fractional kind of approach, and it was a little bit, I always wanted to do it, but I wasn't sure how to get into it. And now the stuff you're doing is enabling me to be able to do that.
Yeah, and it really just came down to an understanding of the types of clients that we have and the types of clients that we could actually go for and actually assist with. When you start looking at the just industry as a whole of what we currently have, it's mainly very large corporations and some small businesses. But the reason why we work with large corporations is exactly what you were just explaining. Right. It's one of those things where it's not as much of an expense.
like relative to how much money they make and spend every day.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So for the medium to small business owner, it really comes down to they're looking for a quick fix and solid service with great customer service relationship.
Right.
With J.Geiger Consulting having a fantastic customer service background and record and relationships that just have been kind of lifelong since this company started, it's one of those scenarios where taking that kind of talent base and reputation, and then from there putting it into an offering that, while some people would say, okay, yeah, it's just another help desk, it's really not, because and I just had a situation earlier where I dealt with another help desk and I was the receiving side. And I was like, wow, that was a disrespectful conversation. But it kind of reminds me, though, that what we do here in our practice and the levels that we train our employees for managed solutions
is different.
It's very different than what you'll get with any other help desk. You'll never have a conversation where you feel like the person on the other line has said that same thing to 20 other people that day, and they're just really bored and waiting for you to get on the same page. That'll never happen, because we actually care about what you're going through and we know your goals and your plans, and we're trying to mold to what is best for your company.
So what if you had to say these are the top 3 or these are the top 5 or whatever top, like, what makes us different than the other companies? You just said one right there.
Yeah. Number one is the relationship point. So a lot of the conversations we have, we're not going through, a spiel with you. It's not a sales pitch. Our discovery sessions are usually, 30 minutes to an hour of us sitting down and just asking you about what you're doing at your company. And then from there, we're keeping track of all of the things that, maybe are red flags to us or yellow flags or, good points that we're really want to, encourage you to do in the future. And then from there, we're building out a possible plan that could work. And at the end of it, we bring it to you and we say, hey, these are some things that we think you could do, but there is no pressure of you being able to do it or not. We're just bringing those to your attention. Now, if you say that's the direction we want to go, we don't just come in like a lot of other IT companies. And this is, I'd say, the second one, which is we don't come in and take over your infrastructure. Because the reason why a lot of companies do that is because they're worried that you're going to leave them. So they make the offboarding of your company insanely difficult. Or they have so many partnerships with companies that really produce trash when it comes to software, but they get a big percentage piece of it. So they want you to sign up for all of their systems, all their security packages, and all these other things. We don't do that. So the second one for us is that when we come in, we look at what your existing software is. We see if there's any overlap and if you can save some money, and we'll get rid of it for you and show you how to utilize those other systems more efficiently to make up for that overlap when you get rid of that system. And then from there, we try and do everything we possibly can to make it to where anytime we're billing you for time, it's because we're giving you something of value. So short little conversations where you're just, your speaker's not working, you need to plug it back in. That's never going to show up on an invoice, but that just gives us that capability to build a solid relationship and know that you're getting value for every single interaction you have with us, whether you're getting charged for it or not.
So those are the top 3.
Yeah, I'd say those are the top 3.
Yeah. So it's we care about the relationship, not the transaction.
Correct.
The second one is that I forgot what the second one was. He said. So
the second one is the process itself that you're going to be going through.
And that we're not looking to like trap you in something, to keep you in something and make it difficult to leave. We want you,
your onboarding process. Yeah.
Yep. And then the third is we only really bill you for things that we provide value for.
Correct.
Wow. That sounds really common sense and straightforward, but really different in this industry.
Yeah, it's really different. And that's actually the conversation that we have with almost every person that we bring on as a client. So originally when we were kind of doing this, in bits and pieces, over 2023, we, told this to a couple clients. We worked a couple of them and we gained 12 clients in that first year when this wasn't really even an offering. And then when we restructured and got all the approvals and everybody was happy with that, and we actually released it in January, since January, we've gained another 13 more clients, because now we're actually putting time into it. Majority of those clients were actually gained in March going forward. So we're not even really talking 6 months here. So the long-term growth looks really good. And the reason why it looks good is almost every conversation I have with a company, and they say, yeah, we're looking at other companies, we're getting quotes, trying to figure out stuff. They ask me the same things every time. It's like, what is the subscription length? What is the bucket of hours I have to buy? What systems am I going to have to install on my computer? There's no commitment.
No installation.
We sign an open-ended contract with you. We set you up inside of our system, get everything started. There's no onboarding fees, no crazy
and then they say,
long-term
things.
There's always a catch, right? There's always a catch.
What's the catch?
There's no catch. The catch is that J.Geiger Consulting is so big at this point, and we have so many resources at our disposal that we can take a cut here by doing an hour for hour with you to build that relationship, and in time have kind of that foot in the door with your company to where when you say, hey, I need a project manager, I need a software developer, we're there. We have all those skills in-house. We're a full service firm. You don't have to go and outsource that somewhere. You don't need an executive planner to come in. We have one literally in the office almost every day. So when it comes down to it, we may not get a bunch of money up front, and we may not lock you into a contract and have you forever, but you'll always have access to us as long as you don't, cancel your contract with us. Whether you use us, once a week or use us once a year, it pays no difference to us. You will get the same service every time.
As a business owner, if I'm putting myself in their shoes, rather than committing to something that might cost them $1,000 a month in and month out, and then therefore spend $12,000 throughout the year, I'd rather have it where I can choose when I want to spend that $12,000, and I can maybe squeak out a little bit more time and do some initiatives when I feel that it's right to spend the money. And so they're going to spend that anyway, but it gives them ultimate flexibility.
Correct. It gives you a lot longer of a time frame. So if you,
and they still have access to our whole team. So let's say, one example a customer had was they were doing marketing emails, and AOL and Yahoo weren't allowing emails to go from their email campaigns to those accounts, and you had to get your certification done. We helped them through that process. We were there. So those types of things.
Yeah. So it opens up a lot more options for you. So instead of like you'll see a lot of statements of work like we used to do in the past, where it would say, okay, this individual with this position is going to do these specific things for you for this dollar amount. Really what we're doing is you'll say, I need an IT admin, and we won't say these are the things that they will do for you. We kind of leave it open-ended to where that person's experience level and what they're certified in and they can help you with. And then from there, it's that dollar amount. And there is no other things past that. So there's no other shoe that's going to drop on you. You're not going to get some huge invoice. Every single thing that we do, we track it inside of our own tracking system. We have a very comprehensive ticket management process. And everything that we do, it's really trying to just make it as easy and simplistic for the customer without them receiving a big bill at the end of the month.
Right. What more could a business owner want?
I ask myself the same thing, but it is still funny to have those conversations where people are super shocked. And then, the first 4 or 5 meetings during onboarding or something like that, they're still kind of shocked. They're like, drop? Oh yeah, when's the conversation happen where you tell us you're taking us to the cleaners? But it never does. And that's just because that's how we do things here at J.Geiger.
Yep. Well, I'm really looking forward to what the managed solutions has to offer, even, because it's kind of evolving. And like you pointed out earlier, it's new. We have a name. You proposed a possible name change to it last year that we still have to say that, yep, that's exactly what we're going to do. And we're still kind of working through the marketing material and how we encapsulate all the great things that we can do. I mean, in short, it's IT for any size company simplified, and for little to no commitment, we'll be there for you.
Correct. And the best part about it is that right now what we have is this kind of managed solutions offering that we're looking at, which is for pretty much anybody, it's managed services. We come in, we handle all of your licensing for you, all of your IT needs, your processes, background checks, stuff, really just your whole endpoint management, industry, modern workplace, really anything that touches the IT industry will support you with. But long term, what we're really trying to do here,
mostly in the cloud, right?
Mostly in the cloud. We can do a lot of stuff on-prem as well. We do have a very solid knowledge base in that.
But everybody's moving to the cloud.
Everybody's moving to the cloud. Mm-hmm. And the main reason why they're moving to the cloud is
workplace stuff.
Yeah, Microsoft is pushing super hard on a lot of like Microsoft Teams structuring, like Windows 2000 10 is going to be going, they're not going to be supporting it anymore in 2025. So a lot of people will start pushing that direction. And just when you're looking at just kind of the whole industry as a whole, like having hardware in your facility that you control, you have to maintain, and you have to go through the kind of these periodical updates and have somebody on staff. It's much more efficient for you as a company to put every single thing you have in the cloud, not have to pay for any of that hardware purchasing. And then from there, just pay for the support piece. And then instead of having maybe somebody on hand that's, working nonstop around the clock to handle your IT needs, working, intermediately with a IT firm like J.Geiger Consulting or something like that, or having us as a backup third option instead of having, 3 or 4 consultants. You could have 3 or 4 employees in your IT department. You could have one IT person, and then from there you could have us as a backup to help with any overlap in case somebody takes vacation or something like that. So it gives you a lot more options. But long term, what we're hoping is that instead of just having kind of this very simplistic word of a help desk, but to have all of the things that J.Geiger Consulting has created and kind of maintained and built for other clients and designed in-house ourselves, to have those as kind of modular offerings that we can then provide out to additional clients and really build an ecosystem of applications that are not just things that are modular by themselves, but are integrated into each other to where anyone can have access to one thing and also use another thing to scale their organization.
That's actually another one of my dreams I've had for quite a while that you're helping with here. I don't know if
because all these dreams we never talk about, but they just keep happening.
Well, it's where, like we go to customers and they ask us to do these things over and over and over again, and they own the intellectual property for us to do that. And I can't just go to one customer and say, can I have this code? Because my other customer over here is asking for it. Like, well, no, we paid for you to do that. And even if you tried offering some compensation for it, they're like, no, we don't want to do that. We're producing, and it's internally, we're building an ecosystem of content that does various things that our customers need. And we're doing it in partnership with those customers and providing them an exciting value. Then we can also sell that, and we own the IP for it, giving the current customers an incredible value because we're investing for the future to sell it to other customers, so that customer A doesn't have to spend $20,000 to $100,000 building this whole custom foundational thing. They'll pay, a licensing fee for it, and then we'll license it to multiple customers instead.
Exactly.
In this huge ecosystem. Yeah, it's really exciting and complicated. It's really simple. There's just a lot going on, which makes it complicated.
In my head, I'm like, I can get it all on a nice little Visio flow sheet, and I can explain it out in a PowerPoint. But the amount of information how big the spider web is immense, and keeping it all up in my brain, I'm glad I can get it on paper. But
if we were to summarize, like let's say we want an audio clip for this, we've got the managed solutions, which basically gives access to all the skills on our team to our customers, whether it be for modern workplace, EDI, or anything else. And then we're building a backlog and an ecosystem of tools that our customers can subscribe to and take advantage of. Everything from managing inventory to tracking time to
tracking resources,
automatically sending out texts, all kinds of different things. We're building an ecosystem that our customers can take advantage of that ecosystem and not just have to build it for themselves or go without.
Exactly.
So, yeah, exciting times. Do you like what you're doing?
I do. I've always liked having the capability to do multiple things. When I got out of the military and I went into Sierra Nevada Corporation, I remember I was talking to my dad before I signed my offer letter, and he said, if you're going to not be sure about what you're going to do, don't get direct hired. Yeah. Because then you, as the type of person you are, you'll get really committed to what you're doing, and then you'll feel bad.
And you'll be pigeonholed.
Yeah. You'll feel bad when you want to leave and go do something else. So he said, sign contracts, do short-term employment, And then when you really find something you like, stick to that. I couldn't find anything I liked, and I hit, I think, 13 different companies before I ended up at J.Geiger Consulting. And just in my first year with J.Geiger, I think I worked with like 5 or 6 different companies, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. I don't have to look anymore for something new to do. Every day I come in, it's a new change, new thing that has to be done, new industry I've never touched before, but I have very good experience because of all the other industries that I can just kind of pull from. And then this managed solutions piece, it really just kind of pulls all of that information into one and then allows me to feed off of all of the other knowledge base already at the company.
And it seems to feed you as an individual. It gives you a lot to do, and it's a lot of variety.
It is. Yeah. It definitely keeps me going.
Yeah.
So,
well, don't burn yourself out now.
Well,
I know you're a hard worker, but 70, 80 hour weeks, that's not good.
Well, last year I only did 2,673 hours, I think it was.
Yikes. That's like 30% more than
it's like 4
number
months
of available.
More than the year is supposed to have. So
it sounds like a sickness to me.
But what we built was fantastic in that time frame.
It's pretty awesome. It's really coming to fruition. Well, thank you, Nate, for joining us today. It was I had a lot of fun talking with you about this. We didn't cover a couple things I thought we might, but we'll save that for another podcast. Version number 2 of it. Yep. Okay. And as far as all of you listening out there today, tell your friends. We're glad that you were able to join us today. Make sure to follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube for more exciting content. Make sure to reach out to us through our website if there's a topic you'd like to hear us talk about. It doesn't have to be IT related, but leadership, business development. Hey, I wouldn't mind talking about fishing if we get the right. Anyway, thank you for joining us for this conversation as you chart your course to your next destination. May your journey be filled with purpose and confidence. Until then, stay true to your compass.